The glass slipped from my hand before I even realized I had let go. It hit the diner floor and shattered into tiny pieces, but the sound didn't come close to the noise exploding inside my chest. I stood frozen behind the counter of the Riverside Diner, staring through the fogged window at the black sedan parked outside. I knew that car. I knew that silhouette stepping out of it. I had spent 9 years running from that man. My heart hammered so loudly I thought everyone in the diner could hear it. My daughter Maddie was in the corner booth swinging her legs, humming softly, coloring outside the lines like she always did. Golden sunlight hit her auburn hair and lit up the tiny features she had inherited from him. The same man now walking toward the entrance. "Take your coloring to the back room, sweetheart," I whispered, my voice trembling. She didn't notice the fear in it. She never did. She trusted me too much. As she skipped away, I felt that familiar weight pressing down on my chest. The weight I had carried every day since the night I left him. Every late shift, every sacrifice, every lie I told Maddie about her father. All of it was so she would never have to meet the man I once loved and then fled from. The door opened. Cold October air swept in before he did. Theodore Harrington. He walked in like he owned the place, like he owned the whole town. His tailored suit didn't belong anywhere near a place that served fried chicken and bottomless coffee, but he didn't care. People lowered their voices when he passed them, their eyes dropping to their plates. His presence changed the temperature of the entire room. That was who he was. Power wasn't something he showed. It followed him. He chose a booth by the window without looking around. He didn't need to. Men like him never scanned for danger. They assumed danger would always come second to them. "Coffee." "Black," he said when I approached, though he still didn't look up. His voice hit me like a memory to the chest. Smooth. Controlled. Dangerous. Patty nudged me from behind. "Table 7 needs you, honey," she whispered, handing me the coffee pot. She had no idea who he was. No idea who I had been. I walked toward him even though every cell in my body screamed for me to run. My hand shook as I poured his coffee. His fingers brushed mine as he reached for the sugar packet. 9 years, and that 2-second touch still set off sparks under my skin. "I didn't come for trouble," he said quietly. He finally looked at me then, really looked. His amber eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. Those eyes had once memorized every inch of me. They had once made promises I believed. Now they were a danger I couldn't afford. Behind me, I felt the shift in the air before I saw it. My daughter. My brave, curious, intuitive little girl standing at the edge of the kitchen doorway, staring at him with wide eyes. She tilted her head the way she always did when something clicked in her mind, and in that instant, she knew. She walked toward him with steps too small and too confident for the moment. Her tiny sneakers squeaked as she crossed the diner floor. I tried to move, but my feet wouldn't respond. She stopped at his table. The coffee pot slipped from my hands again. This time I didn't hear it break. Maddie pointed her little finger straight at him. "That's my dad," she said loudly enough for the whole diner to hear. "Mom told me not to tell." Everything went silent. His coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. His eyes widened, not with fear, not with anger, but with something raw and unguarded I had never seen on his face. Recognition. He saw himself in her eyes, in her hair, in her confidence. And there was no denying it. My world started to crumble right there between the ketchup bottles and the cheap napkin holders. The walls I had built for 9 years cracked open with one innocent sentence from the child I'd protected with everything I had. People in the diner looked up, whispering. His bodyguards at the door straightened instantly, hands drifting toward their jackets where their weapons stayed hidden. "What's your name?" he asked softly, his voice different than I had ever heard it. "Madison Elizabeth Wilson," she said proudly, "but everyone calls me Maddie." Then she smiled at him, and he smiled back. Not the cold, calculated smile he used in boardrooms or backrooms. Something warm, something stunned, something almost human. I finally forced myself to move, reaching her and placing my hands on her shoulders. My voice shook when I spoke. "Maddie, sweetheart, we need to." But Theodore stood. And in that deep, calm voice that once made me fall in love with him, he said, "You should come with us." His invitation wasn't a threat. It was a beginning. A terrifying, uncontrollable beginning. I felt the ground shift beneath me, because I knew nothing about our lives would ever be the same again. The bell above the diner door chimed again as we stepped outside, but the sound felt far away. My pulse drowned everything out. Maddie walked between us, swinging her small hand in Theodore's much larger one, as if this were normal, as if she hadn't just exposed the biggest secret of both our lives. His black sedan waited at the curb, sleek and quiet. The driver stood by the door with professional stillness, but his eyes flickered with surprise when he saw Maddie. No one expected Theodore Harrington to suddenly show up with a child who clearly belonged to him. "After you," Theodore said to me, his voice low, steady. He didn't touch me, didn't push, didn't demand, but the power he carried wrapped around his words just the same. I hesitated, but Maddie tugged my hand. "Mom, can we get ice cream?" she asked, bright and hopeful. Her innocence made something inside me break open. I nodded, unable to answer. Inside the car, Maddie pressed every button she could reach, exploring with the curiosity only a child could have. I sat tense and stiff, every muscle tight. I felt too close to a past I had barely escaped. Theodore watched her, not me. His expression softened in a way I had never seen. There was something like awe in his eyes, something like regret. "Where are we going?" I finally asked. "Somewhere we can talk," he said. The car pulled away from the diner, moving through Savannah's historic district. Spanish moss hung from the old oaks, like curtains hiding old secrets. Maddie pointed out the window at buildings she had seen 100 times, but was suddenly fascinated with now. I studied Theodore through the reflection in the window. The shifting light painted his face in stripes of gold and shadow. His jaw was tighter than before, but behind the controlled expression I saw something else. He wasn't angry. He was hurting. "She has your eyes," I said quietly. His gaze slid toward mine, catching me off guard. "And your determination," he answered. That stole my breath more than any threat could have. The car turned up a long, private drive toward a large estate overlooking the river. My stomach twisted. Memories rushed back. The nights we spent arguing about his business, the moment I realized the truth of who he was, the night I left with nothing but a small suitcase and a positive pregnancy test. "Why bring us here?" I asked as the gates opened. His answer was simple: "Because this is the only place where no one can hurt her." The words landed heavy between us, and I believed him. That terrified me even more. Inside the house, Maddie wandered through the foyer with wide eyes, admiring the chandelier and marble floor. Theodore watched her like he couldn't look away, memorizing every move. "Does she know anything about me?" he asked quietly. "Only what she figured out on her own," I said. "She's intuitive, like you." He nodded once, then guided us toward his study. The housekeeper brought tea with practiced ease. Everything felt too luxurious, too calm, too dangerous. "Tell me everything," Theodore said, not as a command, but as something close to a plea. So I did. For the first time in 9 years, I told him the truth. I told him how I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks after discovering the truth about his empire. I told him about running, hiding, changing my name, taking jobs no one else wanted, anything to stay invisible. I told him about giving birth alone, about first steps and scraped knees, about nights Maddie asked why she didn't have a dad, and how I lied to protect her. He didn't interrupt. He didn't deny. He didn't defend himself. His jaw clenched as if each detail hit him like a blow. "You disappeared completely," he said when I finished. "Not even my best people could find you." "You scared me," I whispered, "and I couldn't raise a child in your world." He looked down at his hands, hands that once held power over men and money and everything except me. "I understand," he said softly. Silence filled the room, heavy and complicated. "What happens now?" I asked. Before he could answer, the door creaked open and Maddie peeked in. She held up her drawing. 3 stick figures labeled Mom, Me, and Dad. Theodore reached for it with trembling fingers. She climbed into his lap without hesitation. My heart twisted painfully. "Can we get ice cream now?" she asked, completely unaware of the storm she had set in motion. Theodore looked at me. For the first time since I met him, there was no command in his eyes. Only a question. Would I let him be part of her life? "Maddie," I said gently, "we need to talk about." But Theodore shook his head, almost smiling. "Ice cream," he said. "All 3 of us." Quote. His voice was steady. His eyes were warm, dangerous in a different way, the kind that made me remember how I once loved him. He stood, holding Maddie's hand, and looked at me with a calm certainty that made my pulse jump. "This is only the beginning," he said. Something in his tone made me believe him. And that scared me more than anything. The ice cream parlor Theodore took us to wasn't the small corner shop Maddie and I usually visited. This place had marble floors, crystal lights, and velvet chairs. People looked up the moment Theodore walked in. Some nodded. Some stiffened. Everyone recognized him. Maddie didn't notice any of it. She ran toward the glass display, pressing her hands to it as she admired every flavor. The staff behind the counter straightened like soldiers. "Pistachio," she announced proudly when they offered her samples. "It's my favorite." Theodore smiled softly, almost shyly, as he watched her. "I'll take the same," he said. He sat beside Maddie, not across from her, as if he wanted to memorize her from up close. I sat across from them, my heart punching against my ribs, watching 2 worlds collide in a way I had never prepared for. "She really looks like you," the manager whispered to me before quickly stepping back, afraid to say more. I didn't answer. I was too busy watching Theodore watch our daughter. He wasn't faking this. He wasn't pretending for show. There was a gentleness in his eyes I had never seen when we were together, because back then, everything in his life demanded strength, control, intimidation. Now he held a small spoon and waited patiently, while Maddie described every seashell she had ever collected. He asked questions. He listened. He laughed once, a sound I hadn't heard from him in years. It wasn't sharp or cold. It was real. My chest tightened at the sight. "You know," Maddie said suddenly, pointing her spoon at him, "I drew a picture of our family before I even met you." He froze. Then she pulled out the drawing from her backpack, flattening it on the table. 3 stick figures. Dad had a question mark over his head. Theodore touched the paper as if it were something fragile and priceless. "You've known about me for a long time," he said gently. "Yeah," she replied. "Mom didn't tell me your name, but I could feel I had a dad somewhere." My breath caught. He looked at me, not angry, not accusing, just hurting in a way I had never seen. When Maddie wandered off to look at chocolates, he finally spoke. "Why didn't you tell me?" His voice was low, steady, but heavy with everything unspoken. I stared at my water glass, tracing the condensation with my fingertip. "Would it have changed anything?" I asked quietly. "Would you have chosen us over your empire back then?" His silence answered for him. Back then, no, he wouldn't have. Back then, he believed power could protect anything. Back then, he didn't understand what it meant to have something fragile to lose. "I can protect you both now," he said. "That's not enough," I whispered. "She needs a father who isn't a target. She needs normal. She needs safety." "I can give her that," he said, but there was hesitation beneath the confidence. I didn't respond, because I wasn't sure he believed it either. Maddie returned, carrying a small gold-wrapped chocolate. "Can we buy this one? It's shaped like a seashell." Theodore nodded and paid without blinking. As we walked back to the car, Maddie reached up and grabbed his hand again. He looked down at her with a stunned expression, as if he still couldn't believe she was real. On the way home, she fell asleep against his shoulder. He didn't move a muscle, afraid to wake her. I watched him through the dim light of passing street lamps. His arm wrapped around her securely, his other hand lightly holding her back so she wouldn't slip. It was instinctive, natural, protective. It wasn't for show. My heart tightened painfully. This was the man I had once trusted with my whole heart. The man whose world had forced me to run. The man whose daughter now slept peacefully in his arms as if this was where she had always belonged. When we reached our apartment building, the car idled in the quiet street. Theodore didn't hand Maddie to me. He didn't rush. He simply looked down at her, brushing a curl away from her face, with a tenderness that didn't match the dangerous world he came from. "This isn't over," he said softly. There was no threat in his voice, just certainty. The next morning felt strange, too quiet, too heavy with questions I didn't know how to answer. Maddie ate her cereal slowly, clutching the gold foil chocolate like a treasure she refused to open. "Is he coming back?" she asked. I didn't lie this time. "I don't know," I said honestly. A knock at the door cut through the room like thunder. My heart lurched. I knew that knock. Precise, measured, familiar. I opened the door. Theodore stood there, but he wasn't the man from last night. He wore casual clothes, slacks, a simple button-down. No armor of a suit. No intimidation. His hair was slightly messy, as if he'd run his hands through it more than once before coming here. He held a bakery box. And something else. A look in his eyes I couldn't place. "Good morning," he said softly. "I brought breakfast." Quote, Maddie ran to him, hesitated for half a second, then threw her arms around him. He froze. Then slowly, carefully, he hugged her back. And the careful distance I had kept for 9 years began to crack. The breakfast box sat on our small kitchen table, but none of us touched it at first. Maddie showed Theodore her seashell collection like it was the most important thing in the world, and he treated it like it was. He knelt beside her, listening to every description, every tiny detail, as if memorizing pieces of a life he had missed. I watched them from the doorway, my hands pressed against the counter to steady myself. It felt surreal, impossible, dangerous, and yet it was happening right in front of me. When Maddie ran to her room to find a special shell she wanted him to see, Theodore stood and placed a folder on the table. "What is that?" I asked. "Financial documents," he said. "A trust fund, educational accounts, property deeds, everything Maddie needs to be secure." I opened the folder hesitantly. Each page was filled with numbers that didn't look real. My hand shook as I closed it. "Money doesn't fix the real problem," I said. "Your world isn't safe. Your enemies." "I'm changing my world," he interrupted softly. I looked up sharply. "What does that mean?" He didn't answer at first. His eyes were on the hallway where Maddie had disappeared, his expression hard to read. "It means stepping back," he said finally. "Selling things, closing doors, restructuring my business, leaving behind anything that could expose her to danger." I stared at him, unsure whether to believe it. This was a man who built his entire life on control, on power, on influence. "You're telling me you're just walking away from everything?" I asked. "For her," he said quietly. "And for you." My heart stumbled. Before I could respond, Maddie reappeared, holding a tiny blue shell between her fingers. "This one is my favorite," she said, placing it gently in Theodore's hand. He looked at it as if it were more valuable than all the diamonds he had probably bought in his life. Then he placed the shell carefully in his pocket, his expression soft and full of something like pride. The next few weeks moved like a strange dream. Theodore visited every afternoon after Maddie's school. He brought pirate books, new crayons, little treasures he thought she'd like. And every day they grew closer. And every day I watched, torn between fear and hope. Then the headlines began. Theodore Harrington sells major holdings. Prominent businessman steps away from corporate empire. Unexpected legal restructuring raises questions. Every article made my stomach twist. He was really doing it. He was cutting ties with powerful people who didn't like surprises. One night, he sat at my kitchen table long after Maddie fell asleep. Legal documents spread around him. "This is the last of it," he said. "Last piece of the empire I need to let go." "What happens when people push back?" I asked. "They already have," he admitted. Before I could ask what he meant, a knock echoed through the apartment, sharp, urgent. Theodore stood instantly, motioning for me to grab Maddie. His security team filled the hallway. "There's been an incident," the lead guard announced. "The waterfront property was hit. We need to move now." My heart stopped. Within minutes, we were rushed into unmarked vehicles. Maddie clung to me, confused but trusting. Theodore held her hand tightly, guiding us through the dark like he could shield us from everything outside the headlights. The safe house was quiet, heavily secured, and strangely peaceful. Maddie settled into a furnished children's room with wide eyes and a brave smile. That night, after she slept, Theodore sat beside me on the couch, exhaustion lining his face. "I pushed too fast," he admitted. "Some people don't like change." "Will they try again?" I whispered. "Yes," he said honestly. "But this time, I'm not facing it alone." Hours later, federal agents arrived. Their presence filled the safe house with a different kind of authority. They knew Theodore. They knew his world. And they knew exactly how dangerous his enemies were. After long conversations behind closed doors, he came back to me. "There's a way out," he said. "A real one, a clean break." "Witness protection?" I asked. He nodded. "They're offering full immunity, new identities, a fresh start, together." I stared at him, breath trapped in my chest. "And Maddie?" I whispered. "She'll be safe for the first time in her life." 3 days later, we were gone. A private plane lifted us out of Savannah before dawn, the past shrinking beneath clouds. Maddie slipped across our laps, her head resting on both of us, the way children always seem to find the center of everything without trying. "No regrets?" Theodore asked quietly as the city disappeared below. I looked at him, really looked. At the man who once terrified me. At the father who now carried our daughter with gentle hands. At someone who had torn down his own empire piece by piece because he wanted something real. "No regrets," I said softly. Our new life in the Pacific Northwest felt like breathing for the first time. Misty mornings, quiet roads, a house near the woods with a porch where Maddie collected new shells made of stone instead of the sea. We grew into our new names, our new routines, our new reality. Theodore built Maddie a treehouse. I planted a garden. We went to community picnics, school events, nature trails, normal things, beautiful things, safe things. 3 years later, he placed a small jewelry box on my pillow. Inside was a simple ring with 3 stones, past, present, future. Maddie bounced excitedly when she saw us holding hands on the porch swing. "Are you finally getting married for real?" she asked. For the first time, it didn't feel dangerous to want something. "Yes," I said, smiling. The wedding was small, simple, peaceful. Exactly what we had once thought we'd never have. As Theodore took my hand and Maddie threw petals in the air, I realized something. I hadn't run to escape him. I had run until he became a man worth returning to. And now, with our daughter laughing between us, we finally had the life we once only dreamed about.